Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an episode of Stand Up Retail. Today's topic is part two of our discussion of transferable skills. In this episode, we'll talk about the same four topics that we talked about in part one about how to assess your transferable skills. But now we're going to put those into action. We're going to show you how to show intent and when's the right time to start that conversation. So, just a reminder of those four topics in part one that we talked about. The first one was self-assessment. The second was ask a friend or coworker, or even a supervisor. 3 was job searches and job descriptions. 4 was be able to give examples. So those were the four topics that we talked about in part one. So for more details on how to access your transferable skills, you can find a link to part one in the description box below. So, Carrie, let's jump right into these four topics. The simple thing, as I said before, we're taking the four topics that we used in part one, and we're actually making them and we're putting them into action this time.
All right.
So the very first one is self-assessment. So Carrie, what do you like to do with the self-assessments that you find about yourself?
So for me personally, I would do them multiple times a year. For me, I would probably do them quarterly, not monthly. That would be just a little bit too much. But the great thing is there, once you've kind of held the mirror up and you've done your strengths, your weaknesses, things that I do, but I kind of avoid, but I should probably be stronger in. Once you've got that framework, it's a great conversation starter with your supervisor. So I would tend to bring up the fact that I did a self-assessment and, I felt my skills were stagnant, or I was really impressed that I felt I had moved forward on a certain skill. And it gave me the confidence, because I had done that assessment, to actually initiate the conversation. Or even ask to have a conversation about my development in the first place. So for me, self-assessment was like step one as a confidence builder.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key to doing the self-assessment. So when you've done the homework, what do you do with all of that information that you've begun to take? And like you said, the important part is that you share it and collaborate your findings in your touch bases, in your one-on-ones, in any type of self-development or any type of development conversation that you may have with your leader. Don't actually wait to have these conversations during your review.
Oh no.
I think a lot of times people make that mistake and they look at their review process as their developmental time, whereas this should have been a conversation that leads up to your review. I always like to say, your review should never be a surprise to you, whatever.
No. And I think the unfortunate thing is a lot of people get caught up in the doing of the daily tasks, that they make assumptions that other people are paying attention to the skills they're building and are going to know the depth in which they're putting their efforts in. And in today's world, with smaller staffs and just changed workflow and people working remotely and hardly any one-on-one time in person, just for health and safety reasons, that doesn't happen. So if you're not the one initiating these conversations multiple times throughout the year and you're waiting for the annual review, it's too late. Like, you can't change what happened in the past. You can only affect what's going to happen in the future by changing your behaviors, your actions, or improving your skills. So I agree 100%, Edward. These things have to be talked about frequently throughout the year, not waiting until somebody actually comes to you and says, let's have a conversation about your skills. Like, no, it's too late at that point, because they've already made up their mind.
Right. Exactly. So true. So moving into number 2, where you ask a friend, is a great way to make sure that you don't overlook your skills, that you don't overlook things that you may not look. And it's a good way to show your leader or your boss that you have that you're open and willingness to have feedback from an outside resource. So this is good when you're going in and having those conversations. And it shows that you're taking this serious. You've done your self-assessment. You've even asked for outside resources from colleagues, from other supervisors, from other leaders from other departments, and what they see in you. So you've really invested your time in honing in on what it is that you are good at and you haven't overlooked. So, I'm sure, Carrie, throughout your career, you've solicited feedback from other leaders, colleagues.
100%.
How did you use it in showing your intent to your leader?
Well, I think, not only is it a good check for yourself, because you might think you're really good at something because you do it often, or because you go out of your way to show others that you're doing it, but it might not necessarily be looked at as a strength. Other people might see certain soft skills like empathy or courageous leadership or a willingness to be vulnerable as a strength. And those soft skills are generally things that metric driven leaders overlook. Point blank, like you're like, oh, I'm really good at creating strategies and setting a plan and executing large scale endeavors. And that might be a good skill that you have, but you might get that done quicker and better and faster, more effectively than others because of soft skills that you just think are just part of who you are. And those are skills we overlook. Another quick thing I wanted to mention in here is that there's a lot of great programs that are actually out there free to use for you to actually create some feedback circles for yourself. So if you're a leader looking to solicit feedback, you don't actually have to go up to someone and say, hey, I'd love you to tell me what you think about me, because you might not get a genuine answer. And this was a tool that I encouraged a lot of my leaders who reported to me to use with their teams. So a lot of times leaders are blind to what they think are their strengths. So what would always come out of these like 360 reviews that are anonymous, you can send an email link to a survey, and it's awesome. And you could send that email to anybody on your team who is willing to do it for you. All of their responses are anonymous. And you can actually say, what do you think my strongest leadership skill is? X, Y, Z. And you might put those down and say, I'm good at them all. Right. And then leave a space where somebody can write something down. And you would be amazed at the light bulbs that will go off when all of a sudden people aren't worried about how you're going to think of them after they give you feedback. Right. So those are great options also, especially if you're just a beginning leader and you're trying to solicit from your team, your coworkers who may not want to run the risk of impacting a work relationship. Sometimes people worry about that. You can always ask your mom, but your mom also might not give you an honest response because she loves you. Yeah. So that was just something else I wanted to bring up real quick.
That's really cool. Another thing that I find very interesting is what I like to do within this segment is if you kind of have an idea or if you've done your self-assessment and you kind of see yourself somewhat in a path or direction that you want to go into, solicit information from someone that's on that path that may know you.
Yep.
Or that have seen you.
That's another really good piece of advice.
It's a good way to judge whether or not that path is right for you, because you're actually getting information from someone that's on that path or in that spot or on your way to your destination. So
or even asking, I think this is a skill I have that would transfer to your role really easily.
Exactly.
And that person might say, Well, I mean, you might think that from reading the job description, but I generally don't use that skill very often, or it's not as
Right.
important as it comes across.
Right.
This one over here is way more important.
Yeah.
And I use this all the time. So
Right.
that type of feedback is also really good to help kind of adjust your expectations if you're trying to move yourself into a different role. It really kind of helps you check yourself a little bit.
Yeah. And so number 3, we're going to move right along into number 3, which is job searches and job descriptions. This is still important because this is part of that research process that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have this information, the confidence that it builds within yourself, that you've actually done this work when you're having that conversation with your leader and you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the transferable skills that you have because you've used job searches and job descriptions to help map out your
Mm-hmm.
path or the destination that you've gone into. It shows a leader that you are serious about where you want to go, that you've invested the time to do the work on your own, because it's important for this part because it builds confidence in yourself. You're able to have this conversation so much more easier because you've done the research. I mean, how many times have you sat in the conversation? How many times have you sat in a developmental conversation with the leader, and that leader starts talking about things that they see you in, but you're totally not there, and it's because you haven't done the research.
A lot.
You know what I mean? Like Carrie, I mean, I'm sure you've been in those situations where someone's like, oh my God, I totally see you as, and you're like,
or as a leader, you're often put in a position where someone comes to you and says, I want to do more. What do you see me doing? And, even on the opposite side of that, looking at it from a leader's perspective, I'm not saying that I've looked at these people asking this question as lazy and not putting in the work. They just didn't know. That's why we're making videos like this. We're making videos like this so you understand that when you walk in and you have an idea of what you want to do, that means so much more than asking what somebody else thinks you're going to be good at.
Right, exactly.
Know your passion. The people who walked in and says, this is what I want, they might not be ready. And that's never a fun thing to have to tell someone. But if that's really what they want, they're going to be willing to put the work in to get there.
Right.
And then you build a different type of relationship. Then you build that mentor-mentee, that guide to the hero relationship that is so powerful in the workspace.
Exactly. And those conversations do happen. You do have people that walk in and say, where do you see me going?
Oh, yeah.
And you, on the flip side of that, as a leader, you need to encourage and foster the homework.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because it's easier for us as leaders to direct and delegate and tell people where to go. But when you're holding someone's career path in your hands, it's very important that you as a leader help them understand how to get to that point on doing the research on their own. Now, you're there to be a collaborator with them, to understand what it is that they see. And like you said, sometimes those conversations are not easy because maybe that individual isn't ready or doesn't know where they want to go. And they have to do a lot more work to self-discovery on what it is that they really want to do. And these simple steps a leader could also put someone in these simple steps, and they could actually see themselves and realize, okay, maybe that's not what I want to do. And that's okay.
Yep.
That is completely okay.
The point of doing the work is to be more comfortable in the moment you're having the conversation.
Exactly. That's the important part.
the point of the work is to be confident in the conversation.
Yep.
And you will get more out of a conversation that you participate in.
Yes.
Because you will be more committed to the outcome of the conversation, because it is where you want the conversation to go, not where somebody else wants the conversation to go.
Exactly.
So I love this topic, Edward.
And
action, I mean, all the work is for nothing if you don't put it into action.
Exactly. And then the last part that rounds out our 4 topics here is we talked about number 4 was being able to give examples. But we're going to take this one a little bit further. After you're able to give those examples, also listen for guidance and not direction. Now, if you've done all 3 of these steps before, you've done your homework. You already know, you've invested the time, you know your path, you understand it. You may have taken a couple of U-turns here and there in your self-discovery.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is where the collaboration part begins. It's kind of going back to what me and Carrie talked about, is that collaboration part can be a beautiful thing.
Oh, yes. That's when work relationships actually work.
Yes, exactly.
And it doesn't become me versus them or us versus them. It becomes a collaborative effort where everyone can win. Everyone can win. Yep. You can win, your boss can win, your team can win, the organization can win. The collaboration is, the beginning to the celebration. I mean, that's kind of lame, but that's true.
It's true though. And it's true. The thing
I really did miss my calling as like a jingle writer.
So, but the thing is about this part is that it's where now you have a partner that assists you along the journey. And I mean, how many times have you, and I mean, there has been times where I will admit, me as a leader, in things that I wanted to do and I had decided was my path, a lot of times because I didn't properly invest the time into it, I saw myself where I wanted to be, but I didn't really put 100% of the work in. I felt like I was alone on that journey. And that was because I didn't bring someone in, and that was because of the level of confidence that I had. I wasn't confident in sharing this with my leader or whatever, but I still saw myself there, and that happens. But I will tell you, the things where I grew the most, even though it may not have been as fast as I wanted it to be, were those things where I actually did the work, I did the research, and I sat down and I had the conversations, and that leader was bought in and helping me getting there. I may have saw myself there faster, but that leader was able to bring in an eye and some guidance to me that maybe made the process a little bit longer, but eventually I ended up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that it happens, and it's you have to look at it as a good thing, because I needed to grow in some spaces that I didn't necessarily know that I needed to grow in, but because I had the right leader as a partner, as a mentor, we had that mentor-mentee relationship, I was able to build on those skills that I didn't even realize that I needed to get to that point, or that I didn't see. And some of those skills I was able to build up on in that learning process before I even got there, that I knew that I would need in that role, but I thought to myself, I'll learn that when I get there. How many times have you done that?
Oh, trust me. I like just I can learn that once I'm there. Sometimes, there's it kind of goes back to confidence versus arrogance. And there is understanding your skill set after you've done it, and then there's overestimating your skill set. That's not saying you don't have the potential to get there, It's just if you don't see the reality of the now,
Right.
and all you see is the potential, you're missing the part where you work on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And like a lot of leaders will put more weight and see more potential in someone who is honest about where they're at and where they want to go and the work that's going to be involved. They will put a lot more weight behind developing somebody who has a true, honest assessment of themselves and is self-aware versus somebody who only sees where they want to be and doesn't realize the work that's involved to get there.
Right.
So by putting in the work, you're already one step ahead of anybody else who's just like, trust me, I can get there. You know, that person's going to probably be louder than you.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, those are the people who get promoted because the people who do put in the work don't have the confidence to start the conversation. And silence is often taken as comfort.
Yep, exactly.
In the workplace, if you're not the one speaking up saying what you want, people make an assumption that you're happy where you are. So, Edward, this is a wonderful outline on how to teach people how to do the work to be able to actually show that they're committed, like they want it. Yeah. And they might not be the experts, but that's what these conversations with an expert help guide you in your journey to get where you want to go. So yes. I love it. Great topic. Great actions.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I mean, the reason I chose these, and I wanted to keep it simple because a lot of times I think we overthink these things on how to build out a career path. And that's why I wanted to take the same topics that we use to assess ourselves and take those same 4 steps and show you, now that you've done this work, you're going to take those same things and now we're going to put them into action. This is why you did the work. And so that's why I wanted to keep them the same, because the end result is getting to a point to where you have enough confidence to say, this is what I want. This is what I want. Yep. This is where I want to go. And it's for you to build a relationship with your leader to where your leader is there to be a guidance for you to help you on that. I mean, think of yourself. We've both been leaders, Carrie. Think about the times that you've had to guide someone versus you having to help direct someone on their career path.
Well, there's a big difference between teaching and telling.
Big difference.
You know, teaching gives lifelong lessons that people take with them forever. You know, and I know both of us still draw on lessons we've learned years, decades ago, on how to be the type of leader we want to be and what not to do to be the type of leader that we don't want to be. So there are lessons everywhere. But, you know, I think the great part about getting to this point after doing the work, then having the conversation is that last step. I would say listening for guidance and picking up cues from the conversation give you a roadmap actually to the next step in being able to invest in yourself, which is what we're going to cover in our next episode, which is how to become your best self advocate. You know, how can you be your best marketing tool in a time when, you know, you don't see your boss often, or it might all be virtual, or the staff size is so small you don't see them for 2 weeks. So it's really all about how can you create situations where you can showcase the skills you're working on so you further yourself down that career path and you get yourself more prepared for the next step.
That's great. So, and I'm looking forward to that conversation because it just builds on these topics that we talked about, these past 4 topics that we've talked about now at this time. And it just kind of rounds out the whole, this whole process. So basically, if you follow these 4 simple steps, you will feel so much more in control of your destination, which is what's important and which is what we want you to get out of these discussions. You will notice that doing the homework yourself makes you feel less likely to give up the control where it is that you want to go, and you're the creator of something that you're passionate in. And that's important when you're going into a new career path, or you're transitioning from, a different, even if you're transitioning from, a completely different work background or whatever, that you're going into. If you've done the work and you know that it's something that you're passionate about, you create those by doing this homework. So I'm so happy to have you guys as part of this. As we've always said here at Stand Up Retail, no matter where you are or what you are doing, do it with a purpose and that you matter. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.